Okay, so for anybody that has a 2004 Expedition, possibly Navigator, um, and has a climate control that looks like this one and has an issue with vacuum leakage, I believe I've found the solution for that problem. I've done a lot of vacuum leak searching, and I've come to the conclusion that the leak is on the solenoid bank that controls the blend doors um, on this unit. Now, some of the units, and the reason why I'm doing this video is because there's information out there that does not apply to this unit. Some of the units, which look slightly different than this, have all the vacuum solenoids directly behind this panel, connected to the panel. However, units that look like this have a solenoid bank that looks like this. And it's kind of buried down in the dash, which I'm about to do a video on replacing it. The part number is 5C3Z19D611AA. It is a vacuum solenoid bank for the blend doors on this. I've read that these commonly go out and that are usually the culprit if you have bleed off of vacuum, which causes the vents to default to defrost in the floor. Now, I've been through this whole truck vacuum leak wise, and there are a lot of common vacuum issues, and I've been through all of those leading me up to this. The last test I did showed that I had perfectly good vacuum from the supply line. The reservoir was good, and when I put the tester, the pressure tester on the supply line, I left the split off to this unit plugged in. What I found is that whenever I was under load and I had this unit running, the vacuum would drop off under any setting, whether it was vent to floor, floor to defrost. Obviously that's the default, so it's going to go to that. What I found was that straight vent would bleed off less, took longer I should say, and then if it was vent to floor, that would actually bleed off a lot quicker. So in lieu of taking this apart and inspecting each line and then put it back together and then replace the part, I went ahead and bought the part due to the likeliness of this solenoid bank being the issue, especially how it responded. The fact that it was in any position it bled off, leads me to believe that it's either the line supplying, which I'll check out while I'm down here, or it's this solenoid bank. Otherwise, I feel like it probably wouldn't bleed off in other positions, unless I'm just super unlucky and every vacuum line coming out of the solenoid bank has an issue. Anyway, so I have some very, very brief instructions on how to pull this dash apart to get it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through those brief instructions and figure this out so that you guys don't have to go through all the trouble of figuring it out yourself, and you can just watch this video. So what we'll start is I have to get this panel off. So based on this brief inspection here, I'm going to have to pull this top part out. And so my understanding is, and underneath this little rubber thing, sorry for the grossness, it has one one hex head or one little bolt there. So I'm gonna pull that out and then go from there. I'll update as we go. Okay, so it looks like there's two 30-second screws. One is there, which I took out with the driver. The other one sits back here. The driver won't fit there, so I'm going to use a ratchet. You'd probably be better off using a wrench, kind of based on, yeah, I'm going to have to put a wrench on that. So skip the ratchet altogether and just use a wrench. Okay, so I jumped to a 7mm wrench. Fits it just fine. It'd be nice if I had a 7mm and a ratchet wrench, which I prefer using, but I don't. So we'll pull this off and then go from there. All right, so here's what I found here. There are two screws right on the inside of there, which I didn't see when I briefly looked in because of all the junk I keep in here. Probably a good time to go ahead and get rid of all that crap. Anyways, those two screws come out, and then it looks like this panel will finish popping out, and it comes out pretty simply. So pull that out of the way, and then there'll be a brace down below here that we'll need to remove to get a little more access. Okay, so here's what I found. This panel has some clips at the bottom that they're not screws or anything like that. So I mean, technically you can pull it out, but it seems as if the seat needs to come out to do that. I'm gonna see about not taking the seat out, and what I've got is this panel pulled back, and then the vent cover pulled back. There's just a couple retaining clips. You know, if you have a cat's claw, that'll pop out really easily. And then there's two 8mm bolts that need to come out, so this bracket comes out. And so what it seems like is, I've obviously already loosened them, is that it's loose, but so I don't know what else is holding it on. I'll dig around a little bit further and see if there's any indication. And then my understanding is right behind this is where we need to be for the solenoid assembly. Hopefully that's the case, so we don't have to go any deeper. So I'll check this out and we'll get some instructions on it. Okay, so I fought it for a little bit. There's a bolt that needs to come down. Base of that bracket needs to come down. So I'm gonna take the seats out. They're Torx head bits. Using an impact with a number 55. It's a little loose on that 55. That's why I went with the impact, so I would hopefully not strip the bolt or the Torx head bit. So I'm going to pull this seat, hopefully just kind of slide it out of the way, just enough to pull that panel out. So there's two in the front, most likely two in the back, and while I'm looking at it, here are the brief instructions. Feel free to comment if you want a copy of these, but when I say brief, they're very brief. That's what you get right there. There's nothing else on those pages. So so much for like FSM status instructions. So anyways, we'll pull the seat back and then okay, so I'm a little embarrassed here. I did pull a seat out. Things to pay attention to. There's three connectors that you can see very clearly. Fourth one that kind of goes up, so make sure you get that fourth one. When I saw down here, I also decided to pull the whole seat out. We bought this truck used, and we did quite a bit of detailing on it, but there's some stuff that we couldn't get to, and I didn't even know it was there. So I'm going to take the time to clean this out. But then the other reason is it looks like we have another bolt down here, which very well could be
8mm. Haven't checked it yet. Check it now. Yep, 8mm. So I'm gonna pull that out, and then this whole panel should pop right out. Okay, upon further inspection, I found that I could not get back there where I needed to get with the 1/4-inch ratchet and the long 8mm. So there are 1, 2, 7mm, 1, 2, 8mm, and then we already took this one off on the panel, which there's a frame mount where it slides up, and then I didn't have to take all the panel off on the other side, I just need to remove that bolt on the other side. That allowed me to lift the center console up, slide it back, and now I have full access to the solenoid bank, and you can see that's it right there with all the different colored vacuum lines running into it. So I'm gonna pull that out, do some brief inspections on it. I don't know how much. I mean, yeah, if you've ever torn into one of these dashes to do any blower motors or anything like that, I mean, the whole thing has to come out. So I don't think I'm going to be able to inspect the vacuum lines too much, except for right here at the source. But I will do what I can. I'll pressure test them and see if there's any leaking past there. So anyways, I'll pull that out, and then we'll look at it closer. Okay, so I've got it pulled out, and here are all the vacuum lines that go to, well, most likely there's, source line, and then the lines to the blend doors. The first thing I noticed is, seems like there's some moisture in there. Now the thing about that, I don't know this because I'm not a specialist in this area, but the thing about that makes me wonder is up above the battery in the engine bay, there is a solenoid that operates the not this, I'm just showing you the new part, that operates the full drive hub actuators. The thing about that is they redesigned that to have a shield or a hood on top of it, so that when water runs down in to the engine bay from the cowl at the top of the hood, it wouldn't allow water to go inside that. Now, a lot of people had issues with hub actuators from water getting down in there and then filling the bladders that control those actuators. Now, on this truck, I haven't had any problems with that that I could isolate. Maybe once doing this, something will be exposed. But anyways, the interesting thing about that to me was there could be a potential of water getting into that solenoid and then getting back into this system here. One thing to consider is that these hubs operate on always vacuum. So if water got into that solenoid and it's in two-wheel drive, in theory, it would be sucked into the system, potentially then getting pushed into this system if it's shut off. It's a theory. It's a theory. And then mitigating the ability of it going to the hubs because it's in two-wheel drive and it's actually pulling a vacuum at that point. The way these hubs work, and I'm sure it's common for most, is that in two-wheel drive, vacuum is applied to the hub to open the actuator. What it does is it puts vacuum on a bladder, sucks it tight, and that actuator stays open. When vacuum is released, that bladder, which is on a spring of some sort, I assume, opens up and compresses the ring around the hub. So what it would do is, if my finger were if my finger were the actuator, the bladder would be sucked tight during vacuum, pulls it away, and then with no vacuum, it locks tight and engages the hubs. So anyways, it's this theory that maybe water got into this and that damaged the system. I've since replaced that solenoid in my quest to repair all the vacuum in here. So that's already been replaced. One other thing to consider is when I bought this truck, it was clear that at one point in time a battery exploded underneath there. So there are a handful of battery vacuum lines that had battery acid all over them, and so I replaced a lot of those too. So if you're having vacuum issues, that back corner behind the battery is where you need to start. That solenoid for the hubs is a big culprit, and then just follow it out from there. So, and could bring you to here. Hopefully it doesn't, for the sake of all this work. But okay, so we'll put this in, put everything back together. If there's any interesting notes putting it back together, I will let you guys know. Okay, so, one thing I think I forgot to talk about was the bottom of this bracket. The bolt doesn't have to come all the way out. It just needs to be loosened up. And what I had to do was get a long extension and a swivel socket, and that allowed me to pull that off. And then once it was loosened, I could turn it sideways and get a better feel on it. So yeah, that'll just slide right back inside there, just like that. Now I have all these pieces taken off. It's going to be a lot easier to get to, but just food for thought while you're pulling that apart. Before you even pull this out, I would go ahead and make sure the console's pulled back. It'll make it a lot easier. Okay, so for those of you that like to do like cool stuff and have, like, I like to monitor the truck all the way, so I have a scan gauge that I swap back and forth between two vehicles. I'm gonna get another cable. What I did is I ran it back behind here so that I can tuck this whole wire back there and have the wire come out right above the change carrier, and kind of set that scan gauge there to monitor things. So I'll pop a hole into the piece. I'll show you what I did. I won't do a whole video on it, but I'll show you what I did if you guys are interested. Okay, so I kind of yanked this off when I took it all apart. Fortunately, nothing broke, but in order to get this over that and these over these, this has to be pushed back. So there are two screws, 7mm screws, just inside the cup holder that'll allow this to slide back, and I'm banking on that being far enough to get those in. So hopefully that is. If not, it looks like we'll have to take a couple other screws out, or better yet, I may just cut that off. Since it's screwed in here, that shouldn't let loose too much. So okay, anyways. So to kind of finalize what I was talking about on the scan gauge, I'm drilled in I believe about a 7/16 hole here so that the Ethernet cable can fit through, and then the scan gauge will simply set right there, which is up against the dash. I'll add some Velcro so that it just stays there nicely, and then I'll still be able to pull it out and use it in my other truck, which I'll have a dedicated OBD2 to Ethernet cable for that. So everything's buttoning back together just fine. This went back together just fine. As far as notes are concerned, there's just that little tab on the top that you kind of have to muscle behind here before you can drop it in place, but everything else went smoothly. Once I took those screws out of the cup holder, they went in perfectly, or they came out and it went in perfectly fine. And then, you know, lastly, I'm just putting together these last few things, clean up a little bit, and then get the seats put in and give it a test run. It's nice and hot out today, so I should be able to replicate the vacuum issue if it's still there. So hopefully this solves it. We'll definitely have some information soon. All right, so everything's back together. Last little note I have is you buy the part brand new, it comes with this piece. Maybe a different model, maybe the Navigators use this piece. What I did was I removed the solenoid assembly from this piece and installed it as it came out. So this will be garbage for me. So if you get it and you're not wondering, you're wondering why it looks different, it may just be this piece. Just take it off.
or you have the model that uses it. Either way, it obviously has to be different for some vehicles.